Cześć kochani, witam Was bardzo serdecznie w naszym słuchowisku, gdzie, jak mam nadzieję, historie opowiedziane przez bohaterów audycji będą dla Was jakiegoś rodzaju inspiracją. Dziś, po wstępie, jako że mamy gościa z zagranicy, w audycji właściwej przeskoczymy na język angielski. Tak, żeby nie przedłużać, zapraszam Was do wstępu, a później do właściwej audycji. To jest punkt zwrotny. Gościem dzisiejszej audycji jest Xolisile Sithole.
So, welcome everyone in the main part of the podcast. Before we dive into the talk with Xolisile, I would like to invite you all to close your eyes for 1 minute, to relax and sit in the open position. It means to not cross legs and arms. Close your eyes. Focus on breath. Now, inhale with me. Hold the breath. And exhale. Again, inhale. Hold the breath. And exhale. Now, focus for a while on the environment you are in. Think about where you are right here, right now, with your body. Make this focus on purpose and ask yourself whether you are conscious all the time of being here, or maybe sometimes you skip to the past with your mind, or maybe to the future. And now, being aware of presence in right here, right now. Take one more time breath. Inhale. Hold. And exhale.
Welcome after introduction. Today's guest is X. X, welcome to our audience. Please introduce yourself briefly and later answer the question, what was the turning point in your life?
That's a very heavy question to answer, but going to the introduction of myself, my name is Xolisile Sithole. But when I was living in Canada and I was playing basketball, one of my teammates named me X for obvious reasons. Playing basketball is very difficult to call me Oli, which is usually my nickname, and then we just dwindled it down to X, and I've been X since I've been in China. I moved to China in about 2018 and firstly lived in Anhui, and then I moved to Chengdu, and I've been living in Chengdu close to 4 years now. In terms of like work-wise, on visa, I was a teacher. I transitioned from training center to a public kindergarten to international school, and now I will be starting as a lecturer. Yeah.
So, what was actually your turning point in your life? Maybe it was something connected with China or something before, because I see that China also, after meeting on Founders Breakfast, that was something significant to you.
Right, so when we met at the Founders Breakfast, I came and kind of wear a couple of non-visa hats, if you will. So I am on a board for the International Professional Women's Society, which is IPWS, and that is based in Shanghai. And so I'm always looking to connect with the community, because I'm the community development exec, and so it's always nice to be on the ground in Shanghai to meet members from our organization. But I also, from the Chengdu perspective, I am part of the startup grind Chengdu, and so linking any people that are interested in startup grind, people that are in the space, there are entrepreneurs, there are venture capitalists, there are, Founders Breakfast is the best place to be in terms of that type of connection. And I've known Kay for a little while through IPWS, and so also Harriet through IPWS, and so being able to be there that day was really nice, and to connect with, and then, connect with you and other people who were there at the breakfast. I think that space, it does have turning point moments, and I think, you meet people that will eventually, when you look back, will be a turning point. I think the Founders Breakfast, it's still working its way, it's still the foundation space, so I don't think there's anything that has turned out to be a turning point yet. When I look back in terms of life, though, it's a very big question. As I said to you, it's a very big question because I've had a lot of moments in my life. I think if I look back when I was born, the turning point was perhaps around 3 years old, when my grandmother was a housekeeper, and the family that she was housekeeping for basically took me under their wing. And so I took on being part of the family, and that was a very big turning point for me, because my life trajectory took on a different way. And so that, I think, would be like the first turning point that led to so many other turning points. So that was the first one. And then I look back and I think Rotary was a big turning point for me. So my mother, or my mum was a Rotarian, and so as kids we kind of would have to follow her to support her with the Rotary things that she was doing, and all the activities that she was participating and organizing. And you kind of don't like it when you're young, it's kind of tedious and it's taking away your Saturdays or whatever it was. And then eventually you get it, you get what she's doing, you get what Rotary stands for, and then you can't do it. And I think for me, the turning point was, we were in high school actually, and I'd been, part of Rotary since primary, and we went to this house to host a Christmas party. And basically we just brought in all the delicacies, all of the kids' hearts warming, all of the candy and all of the stuff that would make for a Christmas party. And we were organizing that, and it was just, if you look from the outside, it was just a Christmas party. Most organizations would organize something like that. And I remember this little boy, and it's actually still a very, very, very sensitive topic, because I remember this little boy, and he came to the party, and he was having a good time at the party. And I remember him eating so much. He ate so much that he literally started vomiting all over the place. Like he went around the corner and he was vomiting all over the place. He came back and he was a little bit messy, obviously, from all the vomit. He comes back and he's still eating, and he's still eating. And I think that for me was very, very, very big point, because for a little boy to feel like, if I don't eat now, or if I don't enjoy this, I'm never going to have it again. And they're so young, right? And so that was a turning point for me to, if I can help somebody to be in a space where they never feel like they have to, that things will never be there again, right? So that's a big one too, clearly still. so many years later. So that's led to me going into Rotary, staying in Rotary. So that was a big point. And then later, with Rotary as well, I applied for the exchange program. And I got the exchange program, so a fully funded scholarship program to go to Canada. And I went and lived in Thunder Bay. Which every time when I meet people from Canada, they're always like, what are you doing in Thunder Bay? Of all the places, not Toronto, not Vancouver, Thunder Bay. And I was like, do you know what? I don't think I had much of a choice in terms of that. I chose Canada for sure. But I always think, even when I was younger, I was always very open to just let life lead. You know, make some sort of direction, make some sort of hint of what you want, and then life kind of surprise you. So I chose Canada, and then I opened up a can of worms, apparently. So anyways, I went and lived in Canada, and that was a very big turning point because it showed me, from a philanthropic point of view, from a community point of view, that people deal with different things. And so as a Rotarian in South Africa, you kind of focus on so many different aspects of supporting the community. Whereas when I was in Canada, it almost sounds really bad to say it, but there was like nothing for us to do. You know, in terms of the nitty gritty, get into the community and be hands-on type of volunteering. There was a lot of background kind of volunteering. There was a lot of fundraising, and I think that was very interesting for me to experience that. And it's by no means to suggest that Thunder Bay or Canada doesn't deal with any issues that are similar to South Africa, but what I experienced was completely different, and I think it made me very sensitive to understanding that people still deal with things. They might not look like what you are used to, but they still deal with things, and they're very real to them. And so if you are committed to community development and community support, you have to understand that you have to meet people where they are and support them accordingly, right? So that was very, very interesting. It helped me with public speaking. It helped me with learning how to raise funds, lots of networking, lots of connections. Yeah, fundraising was the big one because it can be tough to raise funds, and that is the bread and butter of Rotary or organizations alike, right? We underestimate because you always think, oh, they're just having a fun time, look at them wearing bald gowns and all that kind of stuff and eating fancy food, and you forget that they paid an arm and a leg to eat those fancy foods because it's a charity event. You usually pay that much more, and you know you overpay for what you're going to get, but you know that the funds are going somewhere where it's very meaningful. And the people in the background, like myself, really appreciate people that go to these things and fund people.
How do you reflect the turning point, like in your current life when you are in Chengdu, like in China? How you see, for example, people's life when you see, comparison with Africa? You've been to Canada, now we are in China. How do you see even current situation of living of Chinese like in China, no matter if this is Chengdu or other city?
Very different. What I found is that because so many people are different from South Africa, Canada, and now in China, it's made me focus on going deeper rather than trying to understand where and how people are so different. And so using my degree, so I studied psychology, and I just keep finding the psychological links across the board. And so that's what I focus on, because at the end of the day, whether you are in whatever region, you want to feel safe. And that might mean something different for everybody, but you want to feel safe. You want to live in a place where you feel safe. You want to live in a place where you feel like you can express who you think you are, who you're trying to be. You want to be in a space where you don't feel like you're being taken advantage of by any person in any position, in any place, and you want to feel like you're growing. And that might look different for somebody who is wealthy, that might look different for somebody who is not wealthy, but that stays the same. And so China has been very interesting to look at it from a person living here for 6 years, and also somebody who tries to look at it maybe as a case study. So you kind of watch it as a third person, but also as a first person living in it, because it's very fascinating. There's so much culture here, and I always think that for us outside of China, it's very easy to make assumptions and conclusions about it because we're not here. But I always think, and I kind of look at any places that have a lot of people, if you're working with 1 billion people, you move differently. When your population's 1 billion, and you move differently. And that is the same like if, from a financial point of view, if you've got 100,000, you move differently. The spaces, your planning is different. And then you move to 1 billion, you move differently. And so it always comes off as if you're a supporter of China and you're anti everybody else, but it's just you move differently. And likewise in South Africa, a lot of people come to me and their first thing, beyond the wine and the gold, the diamonds, once we've gone through all the glitzy stuff, the first concern always comes down to crime. And they look at it as if like it's a John Wick movie, like you're just going to come in and it's wild, wild west. And as somebody who's lived there, and I've lived in 2 very contrasting locations, if you will, I've been actually, the crime that I've faced is almost comical. It's almost embarrassing to even talk about it. And that is not to take away from the fact that people deal with very, very, very rough and very unnecessary crime, right? And what I've learned though is just when you're in the space, put your feet on the ground, get more in depth so that you can try to understand the people there rather than trying to look for differences, find similarities. And so I really struggle to find what the nuances of the 3 places that I've lived, because I find people and people look for the same thing.
How do you feel about so-called spiritual growth in the places where you've been? Where was let's say the most powerful time, or maybe is, because maybe this is now you feel like the growth is going?
Yeah, so I think you hit it on the nail there. I think China has been this spiritual growth, and that's purely because I'm a person that looks for meaning. And so when I came to China, it was the point in my life where it felt the most meaningless, purely because I didn't have family members. I didn't move with any family members. I moved to a friend's company, so it was through a recommendation that I came here. So I had somebody who was in China who I knew, but in terms of the grand scheme of things, I had nothing, and so I had to look for something. Whereas when I was home, I had family, and so even if I was doing like the most tedious thing, because I always had family around me, everything was meaningful. It was amazing. I didn't need as much. I didn't have space, if you will, to look for spirituality then. When I came here, and especially in Hefei, I spent a lot of time by myself because I was trying to figure out, what am I doing here? Because if I'm giving up my family, essentially, if I'm giving up breakfast at home, if I'm giving up suppers at home, if I'm giving up birthdays, funerals, the whole lot, it has to be for something. And mind you, I was coming in as a untrained, certified but untrained teacher, and I was in the training center, and you have no real connection with the children. It takes a long time for you to really form a relationship with the children. So I had a lot of time in my hands, and so I think China has led me to become a little bit more spiritual. And again, using the same idea about understanding other cultures in terms of understanding myself, rather than trying to go wide, I've tried to go as deep as I possibly can in understanding myself. And I've been in so many situations where my life is always contrasting. At very few points in my life where I have a grey line where it's very clear. There's always, it's this or that. And so to make and find myself in the middle of that, or even trying to remove myself from that, has been a very big part of driving a spiritual search, if you will. Yeah.
Regarding the timeline, like watching the girl, you've been like 3-year-old girl in the house, later you've been in Canada, and you are today. What could be tips to younger yourself? What could be tips to audience that you might give, as maybe there are people who are at the stage you've been, like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, maybe they are older than you that time, and maybe they have these ideas, okay, what can I use it, how can I use the situation that I have, based on these 3 turning points.
Wow, advice. I'm still too young to give advice, because I don't think I have advice to give at the moment, and that is purely because I'm always learning, and so I don't know if I'll ever be in a space where I could full-chested say that this is my advice to somebody else. I think what I've done, so I always try to look back, what I've done is that I've always put myself next to people that know more than I do. So if that could be turned into advice, that would be what I always find myself people that is friends. I have friends that are older, and that is deliberate. I didn't necessarily think of that when I was in South Africa. And again, in South Africa, I was always a child, in the sense that I didn't actually plan anything. I just tried to get on with it. I didn't really think of anything. I was just like, I'm here, okay, let's get on. Whereas when I came to China, because I had to be very intentional, it was the time that I had to be an adult, so to speak, because I had to be very intentional and use all of the advice that we used to talk about at the supper table, and like, it was a lot of conversations that my family and I had, as a family, and I never had an opportunity to use all of that information because I was still in some way still around them. Although I moved to another province, it's, there was still close proximity. Anyway, so in moving to China, I was very intentional to have older friends, very intentional about my time, very intentional about my usage of, and we touched on that a little bit earlier, about technology, integrating it, making sure that I use it and it's not the other way around. And so if I look at the advice thing, it would just be around people that can help you grow, because that would be the advice I would give my 3-year-old self. It's just stay on the path of being unafraid to learn, and if you practice that by being around people who constantly just know more than you. Like, you just get to the point where it doesn't even bother you when somebody has a moment to say to you, hey, this is what, constructive criticism becomes like water, what's the saying, water down a cocktail's back. Like, you just take it and move on, and I think that's been very pivotal for me, to be around the older. And so my little 3-year-old self is just stay with the older crew.
That is amazing. Thank you for today. Thank you for meeting. Stay blessed and still grow.
Thank you, always and forever. Thank you so much, Kordian.
Tak więc, kochani, dziękuję Wam za wysłuchanie dzisiejszej audycji. Mam nadzieję, że historia Xolisile była dla Was inspirująca. Oczywiście czekam na Wasze komentarze. A tymczasem słyszymy się w następnym odcinku audycji Punkt Zwrotny. Trzymajcie się. Pozytywnych wibracji. Cześć.